You've always been selfish. Your sister deserved that soup more than you, said Fernando, my father, at the table. I couldn't take it anymore and exploded. You're not getting another euro from me. The next morning, I reclaimed the house, the seat Leon, and all the credit cards they were using. My mother Isabel's birthday celebration was supposed to be a small family event. I had been keeping my distance from them for a long time, ever since I finally decided to say enough and make it clear that I was no longer their personal bank. But no matter how much I distanced myself, they always found a reason to pull me back in. This time, it was her birthday. I knew that if I didn't attend, they would simply add it to their long list of reasons to point me out as the bad guy. So I decided to go. I even paid the restaurant bill, as I always did. The place was elegant, Casa Lucio restaurant, honestly too good for them. Not because they didn't enjoy good food, but because they never paid for anything. My parents had perfected the habit of living off others, acting as if they were doing you a favor by doing so. As soon as I entered, I felt the attention in the atmosphere. My sister Lucia barely gave me a slight nod. My aunts and uncles hardly looked at me. My father didn't even lift his eyes from his glass, and my mother acted as if she was doing me a favor by inviting me. The meal began, and at first the situation seemed manageable. I sat in silence, enduring the fake laughter, empty conversations, and forced smiles. I noticed that my father was drinking too much, which always meant things were going to get worse quickly. The more he drank, the more hateful his words became. And so, without further ado, he looked at me in front of everyone and said, "You've always been selfish. Your sister is much better." It wasn't a joke or a simple provocation. He said it as if it were obvious, as if everyone at the table thought the same as him. The room fell absolutely silent. Lucia seemed nervous. My mother continued eating as if nothing had happened. Everyone else looked away or pretended not to hear. No one ever corrected him. No one ever dared to contradict him. He was always allowed to say the worst things. But not this time. This time I didn't remain silent. I put my fork on the table, calmly wiped my mouth, and looked him directly in the eyes. "You're not getting another euro from me," I repeated firmly. That stopped him dead in his tracks. His eyes narrowed, his lips tightened, and for the first time that night, he really looked at me. My mother stopped eating. My aunts exchanged nervous glances, and the whole atmosphere suddenly changed because deep down, everyone knew the truth. My parents didn't care about me. They only cared about what they could get from me. For years, I had given them money every time they called me with some made-up problem. But they weren't really suffering. They simply wasted my money on gambling and other irresponsible extravagances that I prefer not to detail. Meanwhile, I worked hard at the Madrid Centro Real Estate Agency, selling luxury homes in Madrid, meeting with wealthy clients only to hand over thousands of euros to my parents, who burned through it as if it meant nothing. I had reached my limit. Fernando's gaze turned evil. Isabel, seeing that remaining silent no longer worked, tried something else. She took a deep bowl of soup as if she was going to throw it at me, simulating a cheap dramatic scene. My aunt barely managed to stop her by holding her hand, but that didn't calm the situation. My mother stood up and started yelling at me in front of everyone. She called me ungrateful, rude, and claimed that I had no right to eat a meal that they had paid for, even though the reality was that I had paid for it. Finally, in a fit of rage, she tried to snatch the plate from my aunt's hands as if she wanted to throw it. There was a brief struggle, and some of the soup ended up falling on my new suit, staining it completely. I stood up so fast that I almost knocked over the chair. My father was still furious, my mother was still yelling, and the rest of my family remained silent, with no one intervening for me. That was the last straw. I had tolerated their insults, their emotional games, and their constant demands, but this was too much. It was outrageous. It was premeditated. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I took the keys to the seat Leon, turned my back on them, and left the restaurant. As I walked away, I made a decision. For years, they had treated me like an endless ATM, but they forgot one very important detail. I had bought the house they lived in. The car they drove was mine. If they wanted to act like I didn't matter, I was going to let them discover what it really meant to be ignored. I could barely sleep that night. My suit was ruined, and my phone was full of messages from relatives telling me to act more maturely. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. My father Fernando's arrogant expression, my mother Isabel pretending to be offended, and how no one except my grandfather Antonio looked at me with any kind of affection. It was then that I realized they were never going to change. I didn't feel any guilt. To them, I was still the bad guy who had taken away their easy life. When dawn broke, I decided to stop thinking so much. I got out of bed, made coffee, and started making calls. First, I contacted Jorge, my real estate lawyer. The house was legally in my name. My parents never reviewed the documents, too busy showing off their ideal home to their friends. I asked Jorge to put the house up for sale immediately. That same day, the house went on the market. The next thing was the car, the Seat Leon, which was also mine. I contacted the dealership to arrange its recovery. Then I remembered the credit card. Years ago, I had signed as a guarantor to help them improve their credit, but I never removed my name. A huge mistake. The debt was immense, thousands of euros spent on casinos, luxury hotels, designer stores, and other things I couldn't even explain. I called the bank, declared my card stolen, and canceled all the accounts. By noon, I was on a plane to Madrid for a business meeting. I had better things to do than sit around waiting for my parents' reaction. But it didn't take long for them to react. The first call was from my mother, Isabel. She was screaming, asking why the car was missing. I ignored her. Then my father, Fernando, called, also screaming, saying that I had ruined their lives. I deleted his message without further ado. Then Lucia, my sister, contacted me. She didn't yell. She simply asked me to reconsider my decision. She said that our parents were scared. They didn't know what to do or where to live. I replied with only one sentence, "It's not my problem." When I landed in Madrid, Jorge already had people interested in the house. In the current real estate market, and given the location, I knew it wouldn't take long to sell. Then something unexpected happened. My grandfather Antonio called me. Normally, he avoided family fights. He was calm, traditional, and only spoke when necessary. But this time, he had something to say. "I'm proud of you, boy." I was so surprised that I almost dropped the phone. He told me that he had been warning my parents for years to stop taking advantage of me and treat me better, but they always ignored him. According to him, they were getting what they deserved. Maybe being out on the street would make them open their eyes. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Don't sell the house yet. I have an idea." I didn't know exactly what he meant, but for the first time, I felt like someone was really on my side. Whatever he was thinking, I was ready. Even though I didn't fully understand his plan, I trusted him more than anyone in my family. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, La Esperanza Cafe. It wasn't elegant at all, just a quiet place where nobody bothered anyone. My grandfather ordered his usual black coffee. He looked at me for a long time and finally said, "Your father thinks he can do whatever he wants without ever facing the consequences. He needs to really feel what it is to lose." I liked where this conversation was going. Then he explained his plan. Instead of selling the house immediately, I would wait, letting my parents panic as they saw the car disappear, their credit destroyed, their bank account frozen, without any backup plan or anyone to turn to. They had lived like kings, spending my money. Now they would learn what it meant to be truly ruined. Then, when reality hit them hard, I wouldn't sell the house to just anyone. I would rent it out, but not to them, but to strangers. I would make sure they saw other people living in that house while they had nowhere to go. "But what if they beg me?" I asked. My grandfather smiled slightly and replied calmly, "Then they'll have to earn it." That confused me. Earn it? My parents had never worked for anything. They always expected others to solve their problems. They thought I would always be there to fix everything. But if my grandfather Antonio had a way to make them feel real consequences, I was ready to listen. When I left La Esperanza Cafe, I had completely accepted the idea. I called my lawyer, Jorge, with updated instructions. Don't sell the house. Put it up for rent. No discounts, no special deals. If my parents want to stay, they'll have to fill out an application like any other tenant and prove they can pay. The problem was, they didn't have jobs or savings, just an arrogant attitude. 2 days later, chaos began. First, my father, Fernando, called. His voice was trembling with rage, demanding to know why the house was for rent. Then my mother, Isabel, left a voicemail, crying loudly and exaggerating the drama. Lucia, my sister, kept sending me messages saying they were panicking and had nowhere to go. Then came the funniest part. My father asked if I could lend them money for the rental deposit. I laughed so hard that I almost dropped the phone. I replied by text, "You called me selfish, remember? Figure it out yourself." But they didn't solve anything. Instead, they came directly to my workplace, and that's when things got even crazier. I was in an important meeting when Marta, my assistant, knocked on the door nervously. She hesitated, and then said in a low voice, "Your parents are at the reception," and refused to leave. I took a deep breath, stood up, and pushed my chair back. I had foreseen this from the moment I left them without resources and put the house up for rent. Since then, they hadn't stopped calling and sending me messages, but I ignored them all. Now they were trying to manipulate me by showing up in person. I went out to the reception area, and there they were. My father, Fernando, was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated. My mother, Isabel, was sitting with her arms crossed and a bitter expression on her face. Lucia was nearby, uncomfortable, as if she had been dragged there against her will. As soon as my father saw me, he quickly walked towards me and pointed his finger at me. "Do you think you can treat us like we're nobody after everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed. Done for me? What exactly? The basics that parents do, feed me and give me a roof? That's the least they should do, and they hadn't even done it right. I, on the other hand, bought them a house, a car, and covered all their expenses for years, until I opened my eyes and understood that they didn't love me. They just saw me as a bank card. Maintaining my composure, I replied, "If you want to live in the house, apply for it like everyone else. But you'll have to prove that you can pay the rent." My mother jumped up immediately. "We're your parents. You should support us, not humiliate us like this." I looked at my sister, Lucia. She looked exhausted. I knew she didn't agree with them, but she had never been one to raise her voice. That's why she had always been seen as the good one. Then my father let out a bitter laugh. "You wouldn't be anybody without us. We made you. You owe us everything." That was too much. Something inside me broke. I stepped towards him and spoke firmly. "What do I owe you? I built my career on my own. I worked hard, and you wasted every euro I gave you. Now you're ruined because you never thought this day would come. Well, it's here." Fernando's face turned red with fury. Isabel looked as if someone had slapped her. Lucia stepped back a little. I turned to Marta, my assistant. "Call security." My father yelled louder, "Ungrateful little." But the security guards arrived quickly, and without wasting time, they took my parents out. My father was still yelling. My mother was saying I was a terrible son. Lucia stayed there, unsure whether to say something or not, but finally she left with them. I stood in silence, watching them walk away through the main door. For the first time in years, I felt free. No guilt, no doubts, just peace. I turned around, went back to my office, and closed the door. My hands were shaking, not with anger, but because of the weight that had finally vanished. They didn't control me anymore. Then my phone vibrated. It was my grandfather, Antonio. "Good job," he said calmly. "Now let's take it even further." I straightened up, surprised. "What do you mean?" He paused briefly, then laughed softly. "You'll find out soon." The next morning I woke up in absolute chaos. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls, messages, and voicemails were pouring in. Messages from Isabel, my mother, from Fernando, my father, even from distant relatives who normally ignored me. I didn't even bother to read or listen to them. I already knew perfectly well what they were about. Just as I was making coffee, my grandfather, Antonio, called me. "Put on the news," he said in a calm, almost amused voice. I grabbed the remote and turned on the TV to a local channel. As soon as the image appeared on the screen, I almost spilled my drink. My father had been arrested. At the bottom of the screen it read, "Man arrested after fight at Hotel Ris Madrid." I turned up the volume. The presenter explained that my parents had spent several nights at the Hotel Ris Madrid, accumulating a huge debt with the intention of not paying. When the hotel staff demanded payment, Fernando lost his temper, yelled at the manager, pushed one of the guards, and tried to leave as if nothing could stop him. The police were called, and my father, as absurd as ever, tried to resist the officers. He ended up knocked down, handcuffed, and arrested. My mother wasn't taken to jail, but she was permanently banned from the hotel. And the best part? It was my grandfather, Antonio, who reported them. I called him immediately. "Did they really do this?" I asked. "They thought they could get away with it," he replied. I figured it was time to remind them that actions have consequences. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. My father, who always thought he was the smartest man in the world, was now finally facing the legal consequences of his actions. My mother, who used to emotionally manipulate everyone, had finally run out of tricks. But things got even worse for them. While my father was detained, the house had been officially put under contract. A buyer was found, Carlos, a well-known real estate developer. He had no intention of renting or renovating it. He planned to demolish it completely. I reviewed the documents and felt something strange, but satisfying. That house, the same one they bragged about to feel important, was about to become rubble. Then Lucia, my sister, started texting me desperately. "You can't do this. They have nowhere to go. They're losing everything. Mom cries every day. Please talk to them." I didn't reply. But she wasn't wrong. They really had nowhere to go. The car was gone. Their money was gone. Their credit was ruined. The house would soon be destroyed. And now my father had a criminal record. I finally decided to listen to the voicemail. The first message was from my mother. Her voice sounded weak and shaky. "Alejandro, please, we're so sorry. We just need a little help to get back on our feet." Then came my father Fernando's voice, full of anger. "You, selfish." I deleted it immediately. They weren't truly sorry. They were just desperate. For years, they had treated me like a useful ATM, only for money. Now that they had nothing, I had never felt more at peace. 2 weeks passed. There were no calls, no messages, nothing. The silence was comforting. I assumed they had finally understood that it was over. Maybe they found someone else to exploit, or maybe they were still sitting in their car, waiting for something good to happen, which would never happen. Either way, I didn't care anymore. Then Lucia showed up at my work. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. She sat across from me, nervous, rubbing her fingers and searching for the right words. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "They're living in the car." I leaned back in my chair. "Not my problem." She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and annoyance. "Alejandro, they have nowhere to go. Dad is too proud to ask you for help, but Mom is devastated. She cries all day. They don't even have money for gas." I remained silent. She continued, "I'm not saying you have to give them money, but they're still our parents." I let out an ironic laugh. "Oh, now they're our parents?" Because if I remember correctly, I was the one who paid all the bills while you pretended none of this was happening. Lucia winced slightly. "That's not fair." I interrupted her abruptly. "You know what's really not fair?" She remained silent, waiting for my answer. "What's not fair is how all of you have always treated me like a walking credit card. What's not fair is that I worked day and night while they spent every euro as if it were nothing. And now what? They finally hit rock bottom? Am I supposed to feel sorry for them? Lucia didn't answer. I leaned towards her. Let me ask you something. If I lost everything tomorrow, do you really think they would come running to help me? Or would they just look for someone else to use for money and support? She looked down at the floor, unable to answer. After remaining silent for a while, she finally stood up to leave. Just before leaving, she turned and said softly, "Grandpa was right about them." I nodded slowly. Yes, he was. A few more days passed, and finally the house disappeared completely, demolished to the ground. I didn't bother to inform my parents. I wanted them to find out in the worst possible way. I thought that after that, everything would be over. But then my grandfather, Antonio, called me one last time. Come by the cafe. There's something important you need to see. I didn't understand exactly what he meant, but I trusted him completely, so I went. Upon entering La Esperanza Cafe, I saw my grandfather sitting at his usual table, drinking his usual black coffee. Across from him was my father, Fernando, completely dejected. For a moment, I almost turned around to leave, but my grandfather beckoned me to come closer. I sat down opposite them, crossed my arms, and waited. My father didn't speak right away. He just stared at the table, unable even to look up at me. Then, in a very low voice, he murmured, "I've lost everything." I remained silent. My grandfather cleared his throat softly and added, "Does he have something to ask you?" I expected it to be money, but my grandfather shook his head. "He wants to ask you for a job." I didn't expect that. I turned to my father, barely containing a laugh of disbelief. "Are you asking me for a job?" He nodded slowly. "I have nowhere else to go." I stared at him for a long moment. This was the same man who once told me I was worthless without him. The same man who watched my mother throw soup at me in the restaurant and then laughed while I stood there soaked and humiliated. Now he was here in front of me, seeing me as his last chance. For the first time I saw him clearly, not as the controlling man I remembered, but as a broken and tired person who had spent his whole life pretending to be strong. And I felt nothing for him. No anger, no sadness, not even joy. Just emptiness. I stood up, took some bills out of my pocket, and placed them on the table to pay for my grandfather's coffee. "Decisions have consequences," I said calmly to my father. "You taught me that yourself." Then I turned and walked out of the place. For years, I let them take advantage of me. I gave them everything, hoping that one day they would appreciate it. I hoped they would really love me. But they didn't. They only cared about what I could give them. So when I stopped helping them, they stopped pretending. In the end, they destroyed their own lives. My father thought he was untouchable. My mother thought she could manipulate by crying to fix anything. Now they had absolutely nothing, and I had the only thing that really mattered: freedom, peace, and a life without them dragging me down. That night, I slept better than I had in years, knowing that the only person I needed to take care of was myself.